By 30, you're supposed to have one full year's salary saved. That's the rule financial experts repeat everywhere. Miss it, and you've apparently failed at money. I dug into where that number actually came from. And it wasn't built for you. It was built for an economy that stopped existing 20 years ago. In the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly where that number came from, why it's quietly working against your entire generation, and the number you should actually be chasing instead. If you're nowhere close to it right now, stay with me, because by the end you'll understand why that's not really your fault. That 1 year's salary by 30 rule didn't come from a government study or an economist. It came from a retirement calculator built by a financial services company back in 2016, designed to give people a quick, easy-to-remember milestone. And to make the math simple, it had to assume a few things about your life. It assumed you started working full-time at 22, straight out of college, with no debt. It assumed you got a steady raise every single year, with no layoffs, no gaps, no career changes. It assumed your employer matched your retirement contributions from day one, and it assumed your rent, your healthcare, and your basic cost of living stayed roughly proportional to your income the whole time. And it's not just this one number. Every financial benchmark aimed at your generation was built on the same three assumptions: stable, full-time employment, employer-sponsored retirement matching, and cost of living increases that track with wage growth. 40 years ago, roughly 6 out of 10 private sector workers had a pension, a guaranteed monthly check for life, no investing knowledge required. Today, that number is under 20%. The entire system quietly shifted the responsibility for retirement from your employer onto you, sometime in the 90s, and none of the popular savings benchmarks ever got updated to reflect that shift. You're not just behind on an old number. You're playing a completely different game than the one the number was designed for. None of those assumptions describe how most people under 40 actually live. The average person graduating college today carries close to $30,000 in student debt before they've earned a single paycheck. Wages have technically gone up since 2016, but rent in most major cities has gone up 2 to 3 times faster. Healthcare premiums have outpaced income growth for over a decade. And a huge share of the workforce now works freelance, contract, or gig jobs with no employer match at all. The rule wasn't wrong when it was written, it's just measuring you against a version of the economy that quietly disappeared. Here's what that actually looks like for a real person. Say you graduated in 2016 with $28,000 in student loans. You did everything the personal finance influencers told you to do. You built a budget. You put money into a low-cost index fund every single month. You avoided lifestyle creep, skipped the new car, kept driving the same one your parents helped you buy. By every reasonable definition, you were financially responsible. And yet, by 30, you're still nowhere near 1 year's salary saved, because almost a third of your early income went straight to loan payments. Another chunk went to rent that grew twice as fast as your paycheck, and whatever was left had to stretch across groceries, healthcare, and a retirement account with no employer match propping it up. You didn't fail the system. The benchmark failed to account for the system you were actually living in. And none of this is an excuse to ignore your spending. But it's worth saying plainly, you were not late on this number because of a $5 coffee or a streaming subscription. The math simply doesn't work that way. Even if you cut every discretionary expense to zero for an entire year, it wouldn't close the gap between 2016 wages and 2026 rent in most cities. That gap wasn't created by your spending habits. It was created by decades of housing costs and healthcare costs growing multiple times faster than paychecks, while the financial industry kept repeating a benchmark that pretended none of that was happening. So far, we've seen where this number came from and why it quietly stopped applying to most people. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. Even financial advisors who still repeat this rule will privately admit it was never meant to be applied person by person. It was a marketing tool, dressed up as a milestone. So what should you actually be tracking instead? Not a single dollar figure that's the same for everyone, because your 20s look nothing like your parents' 20s, and they won't look like your neighbors either. The number that actually matters is your savings rate relative to your income growth, tracked year over year. If your income goes up and the percentage you're saving goes up with it, even slightly, you are on a trajectory that compounds into real wealth over time, regardless of whether you hit some arbitrary multiple by a specific birthday. Now compare Sarah's story to someone who never came close to 1 year's salary by 30 and was actually fine. Marcus started with no savings and a lower income than Sarah, working an hourly job with irregular hours. He never had extra to throw at debt or a fancy index fund strategy. But he did one thing consistently. Every time his hourly rate went up, even by 50 cents, he increased his automatic transfer to savings by half of that raise. By 27, he was only saving 8% of his income. By 30, that had grown to 19%, without him ever feeling a squeeze. Because the increases came from money he'd never budgeted for in the first place. His total savings at 30 were nowhere near 1 year's salary, but his trajectory, the direction and speed of his savings rate, put him on track to outsave people earning twice as much within a decade, simply because he was compounding a habit instead of chasing a number. Here's how to actually calculate your real number. Start with your current savings rate, the percentage of your take-home pay that goes into savings or investments every month, not including retirement contributions taken automatically from your paycheck. If that number is below 5%, that's your first target, not 1 year's salary. Just 5%, consistently, for 6 months. Once that becomes automatic, most people can push it to 10 or 15% without feeling it, because the biggest jump in savings rate almost always comes from the first habit, not the first big raise. Here's what that looks like with real numbers. Say you take home $3,000 a month. If you're saving $150 of that, your savings rate is 5%. That's your baseline. Next year, if your take-home pay rises to $3,300 and you commit half of that $300 increase to savings, you're now saving around $300 a month, which pushes your rate closer to 9% without a single change to how you spend the rest of your paycheck. Do that consistently for 5 years, and your savings rate compounds far faster than any single lump sum goal ever could. Because you're building a percentage that grows with you instead of a fixed target that ages badly. Then track this number every time your income changes. Got a raise? Before you upgrade your lifestyle, commit half of that raise increase to your savings rate. This single habit, sometimes called saving your raises, is the single fastest way to build real momentum without ever feeling like you're sacrificing anything. Because you're saving money you never had in your budget to begin with. The other number that matters more than any single year snapshot is your net worth trend over 3-year windows, not 1-year comparisons. Markets go up and down, income fluctuates, and any single year can look discouraging even when you're doing everything right. But if you compare where you stood 3 years ago to where you stand today, and that number is meaningfully higher, you are winning at the only version of this game that actually matters, no matter what age-based benchmark says otherwise. Tracking this doesn't require a financial advisor or a complicated spreadsheet. Once a year, on the same date, write down 3 numbers: what you owe, what you own, and what's left when you subtract one from the other. That's your net worth. Do it again a year later, then compare the 2-year and 3-year change, not the 12-month change. Short-term dips from a market downturn or an unexpected expense will look scary in isolation, but they almost always disappear inside a 3-year trend if your savings rate is still moving in the right direction underneath them. None of this means ignore the future entirely. It means stop measuring yourself against a number that was built for people who graduated debt-free into a booming job market with employer pensions still intact. That person barely exists anymore. What exists now is you, building a savings rate that grows a little every year, protecting your raises before your lifestyle catches up to them, and tracking your progress over years instead of judging yourself every January. The system built that one-size-fits-all number because a simple, scary milestone is easier to sell than an honest, personalized one. It's not that you're behind. It's that you were handed the wrong ruler. Measure yourself with the right one, and the picture looks a lot less broken than that headline made it seem. If this actually shifted how you think about where you stand financially, subscribe, because next week I'm breaking down the other financial rule everyone repeats that's quietly doing the same thing to your retirement.